Welcome to today's tutorial. It's a pity that some young photographers and student photographers or photographers just starting out feel that they can't create the photographs that they want to create unless they have thousands, millions of dollars in photographic lights, lights that were designed with photography in mind. It can be a $1,000 electronic flash pack like this one with a flash head that also has a modeling lamp attached to it. It can be $400 battery-powered flash units that they feel they need 6 or 8 of or 4 of to create the pictures that they want to create. The reality is that what they really need is a thing called lumens. Lumens are measurements of light. They're a quantity of light. And it doesn't matter whether your lumens come from this flash unit or this flash unit or this flash unit or a $10 fixture that you pick up in Home Depot. The truth is, my first portfolio and some pictures that are in my portfolio to this very day were done with my set of cheap lights. It's such an important concept to understand that you need inexpensive lights when you start out that we decided to call this tutorial Cheap Lights. So come along with us and we're going to talk today about cheap lights and how to get things done and create the images that you want to create and how to do it inexpensively, while at the same time slowly building into a system that is truly high-end professional. Let's go. A long time ago, a millennium ago, 100 years ago, not really, I took a course on shooting still life photography. What I was interested in was creating a new portfolio, and I wanted to use the instructor's assignments every week to create a new set of pictures that I could show to prospective clients. Luckily for me, the very first night, the photographer who was giving the course came down with the story about what you really needed was lumens, that you didn't need the $1,000 flash unit or the $400 battery-powered flash unit. What he explained was that with the correct amount of lumens set for the correct f-stop on your camera, you could create pictures that could literally knock your socks off. And then to really shake the class up, the first week's assignment was to take a picture using only a flashlight. A flashlight to take a picture by. How could you possibly take a professional quality picture using only a flashlight? I went home, I tore the hair out of my head, I gnashed my teeth, I cursed at the guy, and then I started to think about it. At that time, I had 2 flashlights. One of them was a big, round, reflectored flashlight about this big. And the other one was a mini mag light, one of those long pen light kind of flashlights that had a little teeny quartz bulb in it. I then turned around and I took a sheet of plexiglass and I put it between 2 sawhorses, and on that sheet of plexiglass I put a glass with a lemon slice. I took my big flashlight and I put it under the table and I waved it around under the glass, so that I had a circle of light coming up through the glass. And then I covered myself in black velvet on my arms, and I put a black velvet sheet behind the tabletop, and I took my little mini mag light and I put it behind the lemon slice. I wiggled it around and I shut it off, and then I pulled it away, and I ended up bringing, it took more than one try to get it exactly right, but I ended up bringing this 4x5 transparency into my new teacher, and he looked at the picture and said, "Oh, you're serious." You're damn right I was serious. It turns out that I understood what the guy was talking about. I didn't need a $1,000 flash head. I didn't need $400 battery-powered lights. I needed a $3 LED flashlight, or I needed a $10 light that I could get in Home Depot. That first picture led me to create an entire portfolio that was done with lights that cost nothing more than $20. I had one or two light stands, which light stands last forever, so they were the beginning of my system. But more importantly than that, my lights cost me pennies, and they allowed me to take pictures and to start a career. That's what you should be thinking about. Not that I don't have. Think about what you do have, and think about what you can do if you think and work creatively. I didn't have money to buy really expensive, great photographic lights. But what I did find in a hardware store were spun aluminum reflectors that ended up costing $4 per reflector. In fact, the light bulbs were more expensive than the reflectors were. They had spring clamps that allowed me to attach them to a piece of wood. And if I couldn't attach them to a piece of wood, I could take a piece of gaffer tape, about 20 cents worth of gaffer tape, and actually tape them to one of the light stands that was in my closet. But these two lights, and then eventually a third one, became the basis for my whole first portfolio. Admittedly, I worked at night. I worked at night so that daylight, which was blue, wouldn't come through the window and ruin my pictures. I worked with type B film, which was set up balanced for tungsten light. The problem with these lights was that the tungsten bulbs, depending on their wattage, burned at different color temperatures. In other words, a 200-watt bulb burned at 2,000 degrees Kelvin, and a 25-watt bulb burned at 1,200 degrees Kelvin. So the two colors of the two lights didn't match perfectly. Furthermore, as the tungsten bulbs aged, the light would become yellower and yellower until finally the lamps expired. It might be that this type of reflector, this spun aluminum reflector, is too harsh for you. You might want to put a diffusion material in front of it. Not only might you want to put a diffusion material in front of it, but you may want to make it even softer. One way to do that is to paint the inside of this reflector with white paint. But not just any white paint, because some white paints have brighteners in them. And when they're hit by light, they sort of turn a bluish white. You want them to be white. You want them to be an accurate color. One way to get accurate paint colors is to use paint by a company called Roscoe. It's sold at the set shop, but the real claim to fame of this paint is that the color of the paint is what's reflected back at the camera. So if it's red paint, it reflects back red. If it's white paint, it reflects back white. It's very accurate paint because the dyes that they use aren't excited by ultraviolet light. It comes in a variety of colors, and if you bought a quart of white Roscoe paint, you could paint thousands of reflectors. But you don't really need thousands. But let's say you had 2 lights or 3 lights, you could buy a whole other set of them and paint the inside of the reflectors white. And then instead of having 3 lights that could only give you 1 effect, you could have 3 lights that gave you a total of 9 effects. Lights like this could end up costing you $24. So for $25, you could end up with a full set of studio lights. You'd have to put your camera on a tripod, but you could use the tripod in a whole variety of other types of photography. And because you could put the light on a tripod, and these lights are continuous, the longer they're on and the longer the shutter of your camera is open, the more lumens come out of that light. And once those more lumens come out of that light at a 1/4 of a second or a 1/2 a second, it could allow you to take pictures at an f-stop that you want to use. It's a really good deal, and it's a good way to start out. And I created a whole portfolio and got jobs off of these types of lights when I started. You can do it too. Quartz lights, quartz halogen lamps, which is what this light is, and what's lighting this set right now, burn with a consistent temperature through their whole life. They're also much more consistent, and regardless of the wattage that's being put through them, they burn at the same color temperature. So there's less variety from one bulb to the next, less inconsistency from one bulb to the next. To be able to use quartz lights, to figure out how to use them, there are some rules that you have to observe. If you want to practice really good photographic technique, you never turn on a quartz bulb when it's facing the talent. If you people out there in website land looking at this tutorial were the talent, and I turn down on this bulb right now and it's shattered, it would shatter out at you. It could shatter at a model. It could shatter at your subject. So what you do, what correct technique is to turn that light all the way away from the subject. Then you turn on the bulb and the bulb comes up to temperature. And as soon as that happens, you slowly turn the light back to the subject. Now I'm going to turn the bulb out because it's a 1,000-watt quartz bulb and it's very bright. The other thing is that because quartz bulbs are so thermally overloaded, because they're on the verge of melting down, like Fukushima, like 3 Mile Island, like Chernobyl, because they're on the verge of doing a meltdown before our very eyes, you have to be careful with how you handle the bulbs. Obviously, very obviously, you don't want to touch a quartz bulb when it's hot. When it's burning, you don't want to touch it. When you turn it off, you don't want to touch it. You want it to have some time to cool down before you touch it. But even when you wait and touch a cool quartz bulb, the oil on your finger ends up getting deposited on the bulb. And that oil stops cooling air from getting to the quartz and keeping it from melting down. So that little teeny squidge of finger oil creates a hot spot on the bulb and the bulb fails almost immediately. So when you change a quartz bulb and when you put in a new quartz bulb, what you want to do is you want to cover the bulb or hold the bulb in either a clean piece of cotton cloth, or some bulbs come with a plastic bubble wrap wrapper that you take off after you insert the bulb. Or some bulbs have a plastic envelope which they're sold in that fits around the bulb so that you don't have to touch the surface of the quartz bulb. All of that helps your bulb last for a longer time. But if this quartz bulb costs $200, how does it fit into cheap lights? Well, it doesn't. It's a photographic light. But if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Harbor Freight, and you look for a thing called a work light, you can find quartz bulbs and quartz lights that sell for ridiculously low prices. Some of them even come with light stands. Some come with 2 lights. Some come with 1 light. Some come with all kinds of accessories. And the prices are alarmingly low. This light without a bulb costs $200. A couple of days ago, I went over to Home Depot and I found a HDX 4-in-1 work light. It comes with a lot of accessories, some of which we're using and some of which we won't. We're going to set this light up so that it mounts to a regular light stand with standard photographic grip equipment. Okay, what we're going to do is we have this yoke. See the yoke? We're going to take a stud. You saw this stud, this exact same stud in our set shop grip equipment tutorial. It's something that you should have a few of around the studio, and you should really have a few around the studio, especially if you're going to go this way in the cheap light section. At the same time, when I picked up the light at Home Depot, I picked up some 1/4 coarse thread nuts. And once that nut is screwed on, we now have a way to mount this quartz light into any light stand. It will fit in the top, the adapter on a lot of light stands. If not, there are literally hundreds or dozens of different adapters that this stud will fit into. And what we now have is a 250 watt quartz light, which we can use just like a 1,000 watt quartz light. For interest, just for argument's sake, some of you might be saying, 250 watts, well, the other's 1,000 watts. It's 4 times as powerful. But the difference between this light and this light is 4 times, but 4 times is the equivalent of 2 f-stops. From 250 watts to 500 is 1 f-stop, and from 500 to 1,000 watts is a second f-stop. So that's a 2 f-stop difference. So if this light took 1/8 of a second exposure at, let's say, f8, we could leave our f-stop at f8, and instead of 1/8 of a second, we could make this 1/4 and then a 1/2 second. And at a 1/2 second at f8, we would get the same amount of light out of this lamp, same amount of lumens as we got out of this light. Normally, if I wanted to cut down the angle of this light, I would start off with 2 Bogen multi-clips. And I would clip one to each side of my lamp, of my light, clip another to the other side of my light. Then I could put a barn door into one side and into the other side, and I could control how much of the light, how the beam, this light spreads, how much of the light is actually seen. But keeping with our cheap light basic premise here, let's get rid of the Bogen multi-clips, considering that that's a $20 bill. And let's instead look at a roll of Lee black foil. Let's say that I took out some of the foil and I cut off a piece. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to the top of my light, of my 2 pieces of foil that I've laid one on top of each other. And I'm just going to fold it over on itself twice, 2 little 1/4 inch folds. And then I'm going to open up the black foil and put it over my light. And I'm going to take a small piece of gaffer tape and another small piece of gaffer tape, and I'm going to tape the 2 pieces of foil together in the back, which is real easy to do. And once I do that, I'm going to take the next piece of tape and I'm going to bring the front 2 pieces together, and I'm just going to put a little piece of tape here. And if I wanted to keep light off of a very specific corner, I could bend this in. I could narrow the beam a little bit, and I have a variety of ways I could control my light. Our last cheap light of the night is the current darling of the technology set, the LED light, the LED panel. The advantages of LEDs are multifold. They use hardly any power. They'll run off of a simple battery for what seems like forever. and they generate no heat. This is a first generation unit. It's about $30. It runs off of almost any camcorder battery because it comes with adapters. And this filter makes it emulate quartz light. The trouble with this light is that as you change the power output, the color rendition index, the CRI, changes. So it doesn't really give you repeatable, good color, accurate color. That doesn't mean that it isn't worth experimenting with if you're interested in trying LEDs. More importantly, as the technology for LED lighting has advanced, we've gotten lights with a better CRI, more even color, better color rendition index. And in addition to that, the lights, depend even whether you're using half power or full power, put out approximately the same color temperature light, which is terrifically advantageous. It has to do with the same consistency that we talked about when we talked about using quartz lights. This in particular is an extremely interesting light because it's a ring light. In the 70s and 80s, ring lights were all the rage. They were the darling of the disco set. And one of the things that they did was they gave you a frontal light that was shadowless. Basically what you had was, if you had a model frozen in space and you took a picture of her with a ring light, which used to have a circular flash tube, all of a sudden you had a, sorry about that. If you had a ring light, all of a sudden you could use these pictures, these flash pictures of a model. That's what it looks like. It gives you a soft frontal light, and it comes with a bunch of adapter rings so that you could use it with a bunch of different lenses. The LED clicks into the adapter ring that screws into the front of your lens. This mounts in the hot shoe, and because it's mounted in the hot shoe, it can be used as both a flash or a continuous light. It's one of the things that we can see that's going to come in the future, and it actually is a pretty good deal for $50. Personally, I think that there's still a little bit of time before we have to really get involved in the LED lights, but that doesn't mean that it might not be the wave of the future. I hope you guys got some ideas from tonight's lecture, from tonight's video, from our tutorial, and I hope you got some ideas on how to create the images you want without breaking the budget. The important point to consider from all of this stuff is you can do it now. You can make images today. You don't have to sit and wait until you have a $3,000 budget for lighting. You don't have to sit and wait until you can mortgage your house or sell your car so that you can get the lights that you want. They're available to you if you're just willing to experiment a little bit and look at things through a slightly different point of view.